Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here, and welcome to today's panel discussion. How should businesses pivot post COVID-19? This is an effort as a part of our Pivot Labs
Yeah, I
pre-kickoff,
think now it's connecting. Yeah, yeah.
where one gets to know the mentors of Pivot Labs and also get a sort of a peek into Pivot Labs from a mentor's perspective, because we have a very unique and very diverse panel of mentors who have been business leaders who have taken the startup journey by themselves, and they were also entrepreneurs before they became entrepreneurs themselves. So with such a diverse and a rich mentor pool, that we thought it would be a good idea to kind of understand why and how businesses should really pivot, and how they can pivot. So before we get into the panel discussion, let me introduce Ginserv and set the context for today's discussion flow. I'm Girish Hiramat, and I head the business operations at Ginserv, Bangalore. For those who do not know Ginserv, we are one of the leading technology business incubators in India, located in the heart of Bangalore city. Like any startup, we too have come a long way, nurturing and growing tech startups for over 10 years now. Over the years, we have been playing the role of a catalyst to a great success. We provide startups and entrepreneurs the much needed tarmac for the right takeoff, like getting them started with the entity setup, operationalizing their business, mentoring support, access, giving them the access to seed fund, to our own fund, which is basically supported by Department of Science and Technology, and angel investors or venture capitalists. And we also provide. We have over the years we have built a good network of market partners in India as well as overseas through these market collaboration contacts. If any startup is looking to launch in any of those markets, it becomes we provide that easy access. So, in other words, we are like a startup coaching and mentoring institute. So now this is where we have conceived quite a few unique initiatives this year, considering the current situations. So let me now touch upon a bit about why Pivot Labs, and so as we all know, that the worst hit segments are early and mid-stage businesses, and the entrepreneurs are facing unprecedented difficulties in their individual journeys. Today, most of the startups, even in our incubation centers, have kind of downsized their business, and also some of them have even shut shops. And we, as a company, are no different. So we too have been hit hard. So times are tough, and every business is kind of compelled to innovate in all areas. It's important for entrepreneurs and startups to create operating models that would not only sustain during these COVID times, but also excel in future, utilizing this opportunity. So today's panel discussion will provide you that a sneak peek on why and how businesses should pivot. So the Pivot Labs is a kind of a deep dive program which we have kind of put together with the help of our respected mentors and panelists who have, as I mentioned, who are accomplished entrepreneurs themselves, and some of them are angel investors. This will help you to kind of consolidate your IP, reevaluate your strategy, and rediscover the purpose. So this session will be an interactive one, and for over an hour. So we'll keep everyone muted, and you can, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in your chat window, and we'll be happy to facilitate. So I think we hope that you will get the answers that you are looking for in today's this discussion. So without further ado, I'll kind of get started. We have already shared the details of the panel discussion and the profile, the very brief profile of our mentors. I am joined by our mentors, starting with Dr. Pradeep Desai, who is basically a design thinker and an innovation specialist. Okay. And we are going to seek some answers from him on how companies can really look at innovation. Then I'm also joined by Raj Narayan, who's been a very experienced journalist. Okay, and he's been in this industry for the last over 2 decades. So he's also an entrepreneur in healthcare. So we will seek his experiences and learnings and how those can be applied to, pivoting the businesses. Okay. And then we have Amit Tiwari, who's been again an experienced sales and marketing professional. And today he runs a consulting firm where he helps startups to kind of basically raise their sales. That's his company name, Raise Your Sales. So he's going to also touch upon those aspects of building how we can ramp up the revenues in these difficult times. Then we have Anand Kumar, who is again a very experienced strategy professional, and who's run businesses in India and overseas, from in pharma and healthcare, industries. And he brings in a huge understanding and the kind of knowledge in terms of the manufacturing setup, especially when it comes to these sectors. So he will also touch upon the strategic parts when it comes to if there are startups who are looking at creating those products and then developing them and bringing them to the market. And finally, I'm joined by Nanjunda, great friend of ours, and who's been the architect of Pivot Labs. And Nanjunda has been very active in the startup ecosystem for the last over a decade, and he runs a very unique program at IIM's NSRCL campus called PitchTune, and he's also on the board of various startups. So we'll pick his brain on how he's been kind of seeing this particular situation and how startups should really pivot during the current times. So to start with, so once again, thank you all of you, our mentors, as well as the registrants who have joined to know our mentors here now. So to begin with, Nanjunda, my question to you is that in one of our discussions that you had talked about that Pivot Labs relevance, or you had thought about Pivot Labs in 2016, and we kind of, when we evaluated and we looked into the current situation, and then we thought it's much more needed now. So how it was relevant then and how it is relevant now? What are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, thank you, Giri. And, good afternoon, everybody. At that point of time, the whole idea of Pivot Lab came from a fact that there were quite a few IPs that were generated, and in fact, some of those companies had got some funding. They had gone about some distance, I think 2 to 3 years, and they had raised some funding. Once the funding was exhausted, the founders ended up taking up jobs, and the IPs were junked. And this was in collaboration with one of the public institutions. So IP was just lying idle there, and the founders had taken up jobs with some large corporations, and that's it. So that is where we were talking about it. Why don't we look at pivoting it? Because whatever the business model that they got started at that point of time, perhaps was not in line with the market reality, and maybe because they also came from a largely research background. And the whole thought process beyond Pivot Lab at that point of time was about commercializing an IP. So it really made sense, and it still makes sense when you look at it from a commercializing of IPs from various research institutions. But in today's scenario, we're actually talking about companies who actually got started with whatever the value proposition they had.
Nanjunda, I think we have. Hello, Nanjunda, we have lost you a bit there. I think. No. Is it possible for you to kind of re-log in? You are able to hear us?
So it looks like he's lost connection.
Yes, yes. No, we are unable to hear you. If you can you can connect back. Yeah, yeah. So while Nanjunda joins us again, Dr. Pradeep now Nanjunda was talking about IP. I mean, especially taking the IP. I mean, monetizing the IP, and also when you have multiple founders in the company, that then getting them to converge on the same vision. So now, considering that there are models, when startups begin. I mean, especially most of the startups that we are referring to and talking about, they began their journey much earlier to pre-COVID, and they suddenly this COVID hit us like a bolt, and everyone is in kind of a disarray. So, in this kind of a situation, now whether it's a startup which is with one founder or multiple founders with differing views and all that, okay, and how one can also, the how can one bring the role of an innovation, okay, and get to where get the both the founders and to kind of think in the same direction. What are your thoughts in applying those kind of some of those innovations for current times, and then kind of creating a certain roadmap for the journey ahead? What are your thoughts?
Okay. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. This is a very hard time. I mean, this was not even expected by any anybody even thought about something like this to happen. So when you talk about innovation, right, and in this context, it becomes even more difficult, because even when you talk about innovation, you actually know in a way in what direction you are going and what to innovate. But when something's as a natural disaster or a calamity of this thing happens, you are actually completely broken. So what you have to do is pick your pieces and try to see what best you can do out of the pieces, right? Now, these are companies, startups who have started, and they were maybe fairly doing well, or they were even actually doing very well. But hello?
Yeah.
So, so what my view of the innovation here is not so much on the technology front or the financial front, but actually it's about how do you manage your partnership? How do you manage if you say, there are two directors or there are two founders and their views are not now aligned because of this sudden change? It calls for a very different type of thinking. And I wouldn't use the word innovation here, but really getting alignment of what next to do. And then based on that alignment, you jot down your roadmap. Okay, this has happened, and therefore, what can we do with this situation? So the situation actually is the input to generating your roadmap. So I would actually recommend startups that pick your pieces now. This is the situation, and nobody can run away from this situation. What you could do in terms of, if you talk about pivoting at this stage, is if you already reached a particular level, just see, given the situation, given the context, what can you do in the best environment. For example, for sure, there is not going to be many people going to office, at least for the next 1 year. The real estate business is going to be really in big trouble, especially for office space. So what does that mean? That means from people who want to work, they have to get used to working in a totally different setup. So you need to innovate around it so that your normal operations doesn't get affected, right? So there's a whole learning process that needs to be brought in. The whole how do you learn in this context? Like, even seminars were given in front of people, and now we're talking like this, and it's so hard even to give a seminar, because even for us, because we used to do eye contact, we like look at the people and try to make our statements and see how it is, but it's so hard now. So if you ask me, these are the points that you need to pick and innovate around. Can you still be able to have focus in your company to what you want to do? And maybe what you were doing in the past are become very irrelevant. So you need to just say, yes, it has become irrelevant now, and therefore we have to move on. And that's where the pivot comes. And the pivot actually can be in different spaces. It can be financial, because it has a financial impact now. It can be people, because there is a resource constraint. It can be material. You may not get the right material because of all the issues. So there are a whole lot of things that you need to innovate. And it doesn't happen, the innovation doesn't really happen in one space. And if you start to put all of this together, you may be able to come up with a roadmap. And I don't see really for the next year or even 1.5 years, things would change dramatically from where we are. So this is my personal view.
Yeah, thank you. I think you actually summarized the whole Pivot Labs program so beautifully, because it's not about innovation in terms of just technology or any of that particular aspect, but you need to look at every aspect of your business, and then how you kind of really change things and bring innovation in whatever small way, and then that will kind of impact your business road ahead. So now you also talked about very crucial and interesting point, which is the people point. And so we have Raj, who's been a kind of leadership coach, and he's kind of helped organizations and startups where people have been kind of nurtured to kind of think in a certain direction, which basically helps the entrepreneurship's vision. So Raj, from that perspective, and also you have been an entrepreneur and you have worked with startups. So can you throw some examples from your perspective, and how really one needs to look at this, not only from a founder's, if there are multiple founders, but even from the team perspective? How do you get everybody along? Because when you think of a new direction, that can, suddenly it can bring some kind of imbalance. Okay. So how do you get everybody and then, take this forward?
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Girish, and thanks to Ginserv for having me here. So I'll just say a couple of things before I step into that territory. One, Girish, I'm just picking up from where you said, introducing us. You said the panel, you can listen to us and maybe you can find the answers. I don't guarantee that. What I would guarantee is you might find the right questions to ask yourself.
Correct.
Yeah, because and I think right now, I think again now I'm picking up from Dr. Desai, who said there is one thing. It's one thing to pivot on a financial side or on a business side. All of these things. I think the key pivot here is our behaviors, which means what are we in this for? What is my purpose, or what was my purpose when I started this venture? What is my purpose? Is the purpose the same today? If so, do my colleagues, my co-founders, or people who are in my leadership group, do they share that purpose? These three become extremely critical here because, like they say, there's a saying that says, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. In this case, what happens is I'm just like tweaking it a little bit and saying that when the going gets tough, that's when the skeletons start tipping out of the cupboard. Things were going well, so everything is hunky-dory. Suddenly, I mean, you have COVID. And don't forget, I think Nanjunda also mentioned that. I mean, it's not as if COVID was the one which sort of destroyed all of us. Things were looking a little bleak even before COVID. And COVID sort of completed the job in a way. Yeah, so I'll give you one example, which is my own. So we are in the business of providing elderly care. When I say care, it doesn't mean that I'm providing nursing assistance. No, care is for the elderly, anybody over 65, for people living alone, people who are, I mean, just a couple staying alone. They need care for a lot of things, even to go to the shop and bring some stuff, or to go to the electricity and pay the power bill. Maybe they're not internet savvy. There's so many things. So care involves that entire continuum of helping somebody go through with their life. Disease is just one of it. We started from the point where we said, okay, we will certify them, we will give them employment, we'll do all of this. When COVID struck, we had this weird situation where we had caregivers on our bench. We couldn't send them to their places because COVID, social distancing. So what do you do? So suddenly we were faced with a scenario where the demand was there, the supply was there, both of them were not coming together. As simple as that. So what do? We sort of ran a quick campaign. We personally made phone calls to all the people and said, how many of you would be happy to have that person stay in your house till this goes away? So if you remember, initially, I mean, there were these 15-day spells. We started in March, and then middle April, and then end April, and then May, and then the unlockdown started. So believe me, we were surprised because we had 100% record. Every person to whose house the caregiver was going, they were happy to have that person at home. So for us, that was surprising. We just changed that around. We said, okay, now that we see this as a key element, so can we forget about this training and other stuff and say, okay, whoever wants employment, who are unemployed today, come to us. We'll see how we can help you become a caregiver, maybe not with the requisite medical or healthcare background, but at least with the basic minimum understanding of how to take care of the needs of senior citizens. So that was a quick turnaround, and it was just the behavior. So maybe I'll come to that later. The idea here was, I have an idea, I'm stuck with it for so long, I find it difficult to let go of it. Can I first let go of that idea? I think that's also the gist of how I understood Dr. Desai's perspective. So for me, that's the key here. Can I let go of an idea? Because only when I let go can I catch on to something else. So I'll stop there, and then we'll come back, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's a great insight that you have shared. That many a time we get so obsessed and attached to the things that we have been doing. It's basically, it boils down to letting go something, okay, which is actually not working, right? which we kind of face this in sales and marketing. Amit, now in sales we are all kind of used to certain framework, certain kind of processes and daily kind of certain regimen, okay, which is kind of very difficult to change, especially when in B2C. Okay, it's somewhat it's doable to an extent, but especially when it involves a B2B kind of customer segments, okay, where the sales cycles are a bit longer, and you would have got used to doing the things in a very one set fashion, right? So now, with since you have been kind of helping startups in terms of kind of rethinking their sales strategies, and also kind of get back to their kind of old revenue generating ways. So what are your kind of thoughts on why and how they should really pivot when it comes to the sales, or in terms of revenue generation? You're on mute. You're on mute. Let to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, and it's a wonderful opportunity to interact with all of you here. 6 months back, I never imagined that the situation would be there, and we are all talking about it. Being over 2 decades of a through and through sales guy, I never imagined that 6 months I would just be sitting at home and interacting with customers and people whom I have not known, I have not seen, I'm not able to meet in person. For me to sit in office even for a couple of days used to be a difficult job, always traveling. And I think most of the sales guys have been facing this issue. But that's a reality today, And see, today we are all talking over Air Meet, we are talking over Zoom, and so on. I'm working with few clients here where we are also working with healthcare sector, and we're talking to large hospitals. Uh, See, the perception also has changed from the customer point of view. So many of these doctors who are running in the healthcare sector whom we are working with, they are running their own clinics or large hospitals where we are selling tech. They would have, in the normal circumstances, expected us to go in person, do a demo of the software, and talk the commercials, shake hands, meet in person, and work around. But today we are doing everything remotely. We have done installations outside India, we've done installations within India without even moving out of our respective homes, forget about office. And many of our people from deployment are doing it from different parts of the country. They've kind of taken, they've gone back to different parts, saying that since we are working from home. So I think there is also a change both from the customer perception, where they are also now becoming adapt and comfortable with the situation that yeah, this is the norm and this is how it's going to be. I may not see a person or a salesperson in person. I may not be able to interact with him in person, but I will have to do things remotely. There is a scare factor. There is always that question mark where people say, would it happen, would it not happen? But yes, however, nonetheless, I don't foresee that this is going to stay for too long. The very fact that the first time unlock happened, people start rushing out. End of the day, we are all social beings. So I am not in line with the term of social distancing. It's more about physical distancing than social distancing. Because socially we are so connected that we cannot be away from each other, right? We're socially not away. We're just physically away. And today we are selling apartments, flats online. We are selling cars online. That's there for a certain segment, but I would still, if I have to buy a car, would like to go feel, sit inside, do a drive. Or if I'm buying a house, I would still like to go see, feel, see a model house. So this is a transient phase where technology has played a larger part, and it's become tough for the sales guys. Uh, I give workshops. I'm giving a workshop tomorrow, and it's so difficult because I'm not going to see people in person. As Dr. Pradeep also said, eye-to-eye contact is not there. I don't even know, they might be fiddling with their mobile phones while I'm giving the workshop, or they might be chatting elsewhere, just being there. So it's difficult. But then we are adapting, they are adapting, and I think that's how it's going to work. Uh, Customers becoming price conscious, rather cost conscious for their side. So that's another pressure with the sales guys are going to give. So it's a mix, it's a dilemma. But as you rightly said, B2C is adapted. E-commerce has really flourished. But when it comes to B2B, it's relationships, it's your price, it's your value. Your V to value to your price or value to cost perception has to be greater than one, and that'll be something that will keep you, floating in these circumstances. So it's difficult, but it's challenging. But I think many people are adapting, and as Mr. Raj also mentioned about the elderly, the senior citizens, I'm seeing them adapting so well, right? So I have certain friends who are staying outside India. Their parents are here, and they are like getting things from big baskets. They are managing their household. They are fine. They are consulting online with doctors. Things are working out. It's not bad. But yes, this I don't foresee this lasting long and should not last long. We have to get back to what was 6 months back, without the chaos and without the the mud that we are in. I think there are some more things I'd like to talk, and I'm sure as we proceed, we will speak about it.
Sure. No, I definitely agree, and I don't think anybody after the initial honeymoon period of 1 or 2 months of this lockdown, and nobody wishes to kind of continue this because everybody would like to kind of get back to the old ways, right? But I guess these times have brought in a new mix or new perspective that because earlier we could have never dreamt that we would be facing this kind of a calamity, and we should be ready with some kind of a plan B or a plan C kind. But now what this whole situation has taught the humanity is that I think there is the need for plan B, okay, or there is this need for pivoting, okay. So what we are talking of is basically, yes, adaptation is something that we try and do it, but when we talk about making this adaptation in such a way that we kind of start thriving in it, we kind of uh, we don't really think of those blocks anyway, and I think we create a certain new path, and where we it becomes quite where we don't really see any kind of barriers, and we start moving smoothly, okay. That's the way, I mean, while the things will change, and definitely I think it may take about 6 months, 1 year, whatever it is, but for us as a businesses, as startups, as entrepreneurs, every day is precious. So how do we kind of create certain those pathways, certain kind of directions, which will sustain us, also put us in some kind of a new direction, right? So uh, so the thing is that it's good to know that there is this some adaptation has taken place, and the people are kind of responding to it, and that's a good thing when we kind of when businesses pivot. So now I think we'll kind of take Anand's perspective, because while we are doing this kind of a thing, like as Amit mentioned, there are businesses are pivot, they're adapting, right? So there is a kind of while you are adapting, but you also need to kind of that is maybe a kind of a subconscious pivoting, right? But how do you kind of, when you are pivoting, okay, what kind of strategies that you kind of continue with, where that whole pivoting process becomes a sustainable, so that the next 1 year you have created a model which basically would have given you certain new revenue streams. It would have given you certain, it would have opened up opportunities in certain new customer segments, okay, which you wouldn't have thought of because earlier you were in your comfort zone, okay. And then like, okay, so now how do we thrive? And then so what are your thoughts in terms of the strategies or certain kind of approaches that while we are doing this, how do we kind of make it the whole thing sustainable?
I think that's a very good question. So thank you once again, Ginserv, for the opportunity. So I can probably correlate to just two things which I'm actually going through. Well, three things. So the first one is it's a company. Again, full disclosure, my wife is one of the inventors of this. So what they've been doing was, for a while they've been looking at voice, right? So they were looking at voice and using voice to do sentiment analysis and figure out how good a customer service function is doing, right? And they were primarily targeting banking and financial services and things like that. Now, when COVID struck, again, many of the orders dried up. So what they quickly did was they looked at it and said, hey, can we look at using voice? We're already doing voice. Can we now look and see if we can do a point of care diagnosis tool by catching dry cough? Because one of the challenges with COVID is that you will have a symptom of dry cough, right? So use the same voice engine, modulate that to actually see if they could capture dry cough as a precursor for a symptom in terms of COVID. So that's one thing they've been able to successfully do. That's one company, again, part of the Indian Institute of Science. That's one thing. The second thing is where I'm actually very much involved with, where we were working for a while on point of care devices for healthcare, right? Primarily looking at Asia and Africa, where typically the healthcare footprint disappears once you head 60 kilometers anywhere, right, radius, and dips significantly, right? So we were looking and seeing, can we use a mobile phone with its camera, to actually do point of care disease diagnostics, right? And so we were the whole of last year. In fact, we ran 8 trials. We were all ready. We've raised significant money as well, and we were ready for the second round of funding to start in March, right? And this was in anemia and malnutrition, and COVID kicked in around February, right? So term sheets which were made got pulled out, right? So they said, you know what? For the next, and if you talk to some of the big guns, JVP and others, they're saying summer 2022 is when they think things will get normal, right? So that's again one of the perspectives. So then we looked at it and said, hey, anyway, it's a point of care device. Is there an opportunity where we can now see if we can do antigen testing for COVID, right? So again, but then the research and everything else is going to take time, right? So we looked and saw, hey, are there companies in South Korea or companies in Switzerland or companies in China who would want to look at providing that technology on a licensing agreement? China was ready, Indian government was not ready, right? Again, due to many factors. So then we had to look at Korea, right? So there was a Korean company who said, okay, we can license the technology. And we quickly pivoted from doing malnutrition anemia to now doing point of care antigen, IgG and IgM testing, antibody testing for COVID, right? So that was, so in a sense, how do I look at it? If I take a step back, I would say it's about survivability, right? The conditions are such that now I need to figure out how do I survive. So if I have to survive, incoming has to be greater than outgoing, right, in a broad sense. So how do I make that model work is something I look at. And then what I also do is I think about it and say, okay, will this actually be just, how do I call it, a spike, or will this continue for some time? Right now, all intents and all kinds of trends seem to suggest that it's going to continue for a while, right? We're going to kind of coexist after some time, like how we coexist with the flu and other things, right?
Sure.
So then, the model, so you kick into survivability, and then you kind of figure out, does this make sense for me to continue doing? If it doesn't, can I quickly sell that technology to somebody else or license it to somebody so that I can again be afloat? Right, so that's something we've looked at. Now the third model I will talk about is so we're also working on mental illness, right? So one of the MVPs we were looking at doing is an 8-month model, right? Now we know 8 months is a very long time to survive, right? Especially when you're paying large amounts of money to data scientists and others. So then can you constrict that MVP to an MVT, maybe a minimal viable test of maybe a few months, right? So that you can go show that in the marketplace, get a proof of concept faster, so that you can then see if there is a collaboration opportunity. So instead of you building your own product, now what you do is you see if you can co-build a product with an alpha customer, right? And then see if you can take the product to the market together, right? So three types of models we've kind of experimented. Unfortunately, all that impacted me personally, but that's been an interesting game so far, right? So I've always looked at it from an agile perspective, and as you probably know, cash is king for all startups, right? Irrespective of what we say, right? So how do we survive is the question, right? And some of those things we've done is we've actually shut down our offices, right? Well, we didn't shut it down right away abruptly. We said, hey, some of you work from home, see how it goes, right? And then slowly we've kind of moved to a situation where we've said, guys, please work from home, right? And what we will do is we'll use Jira, we'll use Trello, we'll use a lot of those collaboration technologies if we need to, and we'll see how we can catch up. Maybe instead of a stand up every day in the morning, we'll actually do a stand up on Zoom, maybe for 10 minutes, right? And that's, again, it's a survivability thing, and that's kind of kicked in. So yeah, so those are my points. Of course, supply chain disruptions, a lot of issues are there in that game, but we'll talk about that as we continue the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's you said it very well. It's about the survivability, right? I like the fact that the incoming has to be greater than incoming should be greater than the outgoing. I think that's where we'll have to kind of start looking at certain new ways. I mean, some of the examples that you have quoted, how swiftly they are able to kind of look at some of the opportunities that were lying around, and then create a certain faster go-to-market kind of approach, and then tap into it, and then create certain trials there, and then see whether what's working or not, and then so it's all about that agility. It's not about getting stuck with something that like earlier days or pre-COVID, we had the luxury of sitting and then kind of breaking our head why this is not working. And I think one of the thing that you brought out, it's not about just sitting and then wasting time. You quickly keep moving and then checking around the opportunities, start creating, co-creating. Co-creation is also something really many a times that we miss, because we kind of think that we know everything, we can do this. But I believe I'm a great proponent of co-creation, because that's where one of this our whole effort that you all joining us, and we Ginserv doing this, it's one bigger testimony or example of this co-creation for the benefit of the startups who are currently in that kind of a bit of a confusion state. So I think it's entrepreneurship is all about being resourceful also. I think it's sometimes when you're stuck somewhere, I think we just need to step up or step out, and then ask somebody that and just like as Raj mentioned, it's about asking questions. The answers will automatically happen, but I think asking questions, going and seeking out that help. So I now kind of I request each one of you to kind of come out, and maybe if you have certain thoughts to kind of reflect on what our co-panelists have said. Nanjunda, I think we missed your that part, about the relevance of pivoting in the current times, right? So while we have touched about, but I would like to hear from you how you are looking at it and what can be done.
Well, Thanks, and yeah, apologies for the connection issues that I couldn't. Rather, I was continuing to speak and none of you could hear. So while good to get the perspective of all of you, and I pretty much agree with uh, all of it. I personally do believe that we will possibly see the recovery in 22 and, and everything else. But what I wanted to say earlier was that how should businesses look at pivoting given this whole scenario? I think we should start looking really local. I think that has been biggest what do you say a smoke screen that unfortunately much of the startup ecosystems have driven to the startups, that how soon, how fast can you grow, scale, and become a unicorn, right? I mean, people have been put on a false ride and chasing a false dream, and a lot of money has also been poured into it. And if people don't learn now with all this situation and COVID, I don't think they will ever learn then. So, in many a sense, I think we really have to thank this scenario to understand that we really have to look near, look around, and look really local. Because if you are able to create value around locally, then we will obviously be able to create value and it will start growing bigger and bigger. So, and when I say look local, we obviously have to see if we can work with people locally, we can collaborate locally, so that we don't have to own and control all the resources, which we actually don't. And neither do we have to look at far from cheaper resources like we used to. A lot of companies still depend on getting things coming from other parts of the world, China, and trading was one of the big businesses, in fact. Right, and many of the startup ecosystem where we have seen startups talking about building a big venture, primarily they were doing trading, importing stuff for cheap and rebranding and selling. So I think we are getting more real now. So when we talk about pivoting, people, this is a time to look local and strengthen our local realities. And also probably we have to sensitize it, which we have actually shut it out. We have closed ourselves. So probably each aspect of what Raj was talking about is how do we see the real value from as co-founders, and how Pradeep was talking about is being real, not just innovation for sake of innovation, but being real and creating real value. And what Amit was talking about was again a value aspect, and also more a near-term goal of keeping a revenue flow. And what Anand was talking about is utilizing and maximizing the current scenario more than trying to reinvent what we have, and how do we actually look at uh, getting better value out of it, and it is best possible local. So I think my approach is that let's go local, and that's the best way we could possibly pivot and sustain and survive also. Yep.
Okay. Yes. You are able to hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, we kind of, touched upon certain key essence of the need to pivot. And actually, I mean, like what has emerged from this 20 minutes. I mean, like it's actually, as Dr. Pradeep mentioned about how we need to kind of think about innovation, every small aspect of it. And Raj, you brought out the behavioral thing. It's all about, how do we kind of founders and as a team, we kind of, suddenly calibrate our behavior so that because customers have already kind of calibrated and responded. So you are able to kind of see that those certain very visible opportunities. There are also certain not so visible. So you kind of get the behavior rallying around that. And Amit talked about the adaptation, and then the Anand mentioned about survivability and co-creation. And Nanjunda is kind of talking about value creation. So I think this is actually the real framework of pivot that we kind of, when we even initially when we envisaged that when we thought of the next 4 weeks, how we are going to work with those startups and the entrepreneurs, where we will I bring out these aspects and then delve deep into it in a kind of a very structured fashion, so that these entrepreneurs and startups and founders are able to develop a kind of a blueprint for the next 30 days or a 60-day or a 90-day kind of. So what will this will give them a kind of a roadmap where they are kind of looking at those opportunities that are lying around, rather than like as Nanjuna mentioned, thinking elsewhere. And how do we kind of get the whole team and everybody to kind of converge on one particular few paths, rather than each one taking into different direction. And also there is a kind of an external perspective that they get to hear. So this is a great opportunity for all those entrepreneurs and startups to kind of participate in Pivot Labs and do this. So Nanjuna, I mean, can you kind of elaborate this a bit and see what are the kind of how the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks are going to be? While I mean, I would like to also add that tomorrow we have another very interesting panel discussion where all our cash kings are going to be on that particular panel, where they will touch upon the finance part of it. How do we kind of see whatever they have currently, how they can maximize that part. So that we will anyway go in detail tomorrow. But I think with respect to these aspects now, Nanjuna, can you throw some more light on how an entrepreneur should see these next 3 weeks with each mentor?
Okay. Well, to start with, Girish, I think it's a great step that you came in with to say that it's not going to be costed, or there is no upfront cost to the startup to come into it. And given this whole scenario that we are trying to get startups who are potentially winding up or already have decided to wind up, and they just heard about Pivot Labs and may think about giving it another shot. So they don't really have to worry about it, that there is no upfront cost to them. When I say upfront cost, they don't really have to pay anything. They just have to come for this. So that's the biggest step, right? And that's the biggest motivation for them. And that's a big promise. And that is something you've made it and you've facilitated it. So thank you. And also congratulations on a big step on that. So having said that, if a startup could come forward, if they have already chosen to wind up and if they want to give it a shot at it. So there are various scenarios, right? They may have even like Raj mentioned in his opening statement that there are a whole lot of scenarios and co-founders. I think some line he mentioned that difficult times bring. Sorry, Raj, I'm not able to quote you right. So in those difficult times, bring our original self and how we, it shows our inner strength as well. So that is where some of the weaker co-founders try to jump the ship, and some of them will try to hold on and lead further. So obviously we will have startups who are potentially led by one or only few of the co-founders and not all of the co-founders, and which is still a welcome here. And despite that, some of them even be funded startups, and they may have money in the account, but the investors would have frozen it for obvious reasons, that there is that business model that they got started with is not moving, so they have been held up. So in all these kind of scenarios, the whole idea of getting this kind of if I can put it, a star mentor group to come together to take up their problems and look through it, and spend time thinking through and making them think again, and look at how to go about it.
is a big step. And how the whole thing works is that once we start getting their applications, we've already started getting their applications. It's crossed 10 applications, if I'm right. So we are getting those details, which also suggests that where they have been, what was their past revenue, and when it stopped. And if we've also asked them if they realize where they have made some mistakes. The idea is that, in the last 6-7 months, they would have had time to retrospect about where things would have gone wrong and what is their mistake and such. So idea is to capture all those things, and as they articulate, that will also help us narrow down to see which mentor can be the right mentor for them in this effort. But having said that, one definite effort is that we are not trying to put them to a mentor who comes from the same domain or enterprise background, primarily because we want to look at the other aspects of it, the softer aspects of it, because what is essential is that the mentor does not necessarily bring the domain baggage, because the mentor can potentially drive them to look at things openly. So we will obviously try to get them to work with mentors not necessarily coming from the same background, just to bring the diversity of thought and experience which obviously the mentor brings in. But again, having said that, it's not that we are going to put those startups with one mentor alone. We will have one lead mentor, and we will have one support mentor or a associate mentor. And the idea being that again brings an element of diversity to the whole approach. And at the same time, while we have 10 mentors here, we are looking at each mentor to be a lead mentor for a maximum of 4 startups, so that they don't get overcommitted and they don't get drained either, so that there is an option of all of them to play a different role here. And at the same time, it's not that each startup gets to work or get the benefit of only 2 mentors. They are always welcome to reach out to the other mentors. And in fact, each of our lead mentors will also be looking at what are those strengths, and they proactively can reach out to the other mentors to say that, listen, these are my startups, why don't you have a look? I would like you to have a chat with them. So each of us will be having this conscious effort in getting the maximum value to that startup. So having this kind of a model, I don't think a startup can ask something more, but this process is designed to make sure that they get better of it. And at the same time, if one spends a little time on the website, where we've also shared the whole process and the flow, where we have talked about how do we look at it and what are the criteria to evaluate them, and understand the startup, the founder, and the business. So each of those things from that 4-step methodology. So that will also give a lot of ideas to them. And if they don't understand, they can always reach us and we can talk about it. And you actually, Girish, have already mentioned that this whole effort is to drive towards working towards a short-term goal of 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days milestones. So the whole effort in this next 3 weeks would be, or the 3 weeks from the time of starting would be, that with the mentors, those startups will, it's not that mentor will tell the startup that, listen, this is what you should be doing. It's collectively arrived with the startup, and the startup founder rather arrives at it with the help of the mentor, that this is the milestone for 30 days, milestone for 60 and 90 days. And which is also essentially getting to the point that your plan B has to be now, right? That referring to that, what can we do now? And if we have to survive now, we have to survive today. So that is why we are forcing down to 30, 60, and 90 days. So I hope I've covered everything. Otherwise, if you can fill in something. Unmute, Girish.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So I think you have covered the whole spectrum, and it gives the complete detail of the program, and how startups can kind of. It's not about giving them some kind of a ready textbook that here it is and then you have all the answers. So it is about, sitting with each one of them and then, going into details of their current challenges and then, kind of identifying the problems and then, kind of coming up, also picking their brains and kind of what kind of solution would really work better, where we give our perspective. So, and also like as Anand mentioned earlier, that it's also about opening their eyes for the kind of opportunities in and around their certain existing products or solutions. Okay, so I don't think so far anybody, any incubation center or any institute may have come up with this kind of a program on this scale, because it's not about just one individual mentor. I mean, of course, Ginserv alone couldn't have pulled it off without the support and the guidance and the contribution of each one of you. So we are really grateful for that, because and you brought out that particular aspect that it's not about where these startups need not really think about that, okay, so many mentors are coming and they are investing in these many hours, then the cost could be higher. It's completely free. Okay, so we want them to succeed, we want them to take this benefit. Yes, I mean, like, we see them, if this really works out good for them and their ventures, and we will be happy to kind of partner with them in for their future, strategies or directions. So that is the whole, the vision and the intent. So now coming back to Raj, I mean, earlier you wanted.
Sorry, just one last thing.
Yeah.
This whole effort also gives opportunity for those entrepreneurs who in the Pivot Labs to collaborate with any of the mentors, even in the longer terms. Of course, provided the mentor also agrees with the engagement, but they have an opportunity to engage with any of the mentors. So that's one aspect.
Very good. Very true. So Raj, now I come back to you because you need to kind of get on. You need to go for another call. So quickly, I mean, now you talked about that earlier. You said you will touch upon that. The whole. You talked about the behavior part of it, in terms of leadership. That what kind of leadership that this actually helps them to kind of develop, and what are the kind of certain things that they need to really tap into. So what are your kind of thoughts, and how we'll be able to kind of help?
Yeah. See, I'll use a few words which the co-panelists have used. One of the words that come to mind immediately is agility, which Anand used. So there is a need to be agile here.
Yes.
Because the situation is such that if you don't do it now, then I think, like they say, the bus is gone. I mean, you have missed the bus. So the idea is that, yes, we are facing a situation. It's a tough time. It's a scenario where there is still a window of opportunity. And the question is, how do I take this forward? So like I said, I'll just pick it up from what I said earlier of letting go. So letting go is a big word. I mean, even your scriptures talk about it. I'm not going there. I mean, I'm sure everyone would have read it, and all scriptures talk about it. The one key element is, I'll explain it in a simple way. I mean, I'm holding this cup. I mean, you can't see it. If this cup is full of water or full of some liquid, the more liquid I pour into this, what happens? It just flows out.
Yes.
Right. So even if first thing that we need to understand in a leadership role is that, can I empty some of it? So in my mind, the cup is equivalent to right here. Can I empty some of the ideas, some of the perspectives, or some of the thoughts, some of the beliefs, some of the concepts which I came in with when I started this venture? And it could also include people that came along with me. We gathered because we had a certain goal in front of us, whatever that goal be. Now, maybe that goal has shifted. And there are people in the group who might not be comfortable with the shifting goal, maybe with the idea of pivoting itself. So as a leader, what do I do? That is my first challenge. Do I go ahead? Do I actually go ahead and say, you know what, all in it, all for it, or it's all or nothing? I mean, either we all go together or we don't go together. So that is the dangerous thing, because somewhere maybe I have a stronger belief about of this idea and its ability to pivot. So I need to hold on to those thoughts, and I need to say, yes, I can do this, I can change. Having said that, now how do I change? I think that is where the entire exercise that we are doing now comes into play. Yes, I have a feeling that yes, I can do this. Having said that, some of it I can let go, and rest of it I bring to the table, have these conversations, ask myself the right questions. Instead of asking the mentors the question, the mentors can help ask the person who is coming to the lab the right questions. They can themselves ask the question because the answers are there. I'll take another example. We talked about, we talked about how there is this, everybody comes in asking, okay, what should I do? Who knows best?
Yeah.
I don't, right? I don't think any one of us sitting here can claim that we know how the other person should be. Only they know best. What each one of us can do is provide our inputs and help that person understand, okay, what is it that what does the situation demand? So I've been working, I'll give a couple of examples very quickly. I've been working with a couple of organizations who actually were profitable. And one was in the travel industry. Now we all know what has happened to the travel industry, right? I mean, there's no travel. So what do you do with the industry then? So those people, they were profitable. Suddenly they ran out of, there was nothing left. 2 months ago, we sort of got together, had these conversations, and they came up with a bunch of ideas. I'm not, I can't share it here because I'm under, there is a non-disclosure there. So they came up with something on their own, to which two of the top leadership didn't agree to. So I sat with them, and I didn't convince them one way or the other. I sat with them, worked with them, made them sort of write out what makes them unhappy with this, or what makes them doubt this. And I asked the other guys to write down what they think will make this work, have that discussion, come to a conclusion. At the end of it, I found one person said, still, I want to leave. They left. But then the business is actually started already now. So we see the green shoots within 2 months. That's quick. Just 2 months, we are seeing the green shoots appearing very slowly. And the second one is my own business, because I think Amit mentioned training, sales training, right? I mean, I was also into training and development. I was doing a lot of it, behavior stuff, coaching, neuro-linguistic programming, all that stuff. When lockdown happened, I had no idea what was going to happen to me, because how can you train? I mean, I think a bunch of us, all of us said, unless we connect with people face to face, we are right in front. I mean, there is this interaction, it doesn't work. Believe me when I tell you that it actually worked pretty well. So I might have been doing 5 training sessions a month. I'm still doing 5. Actually, I'm getting more participants into the webinar. The only thing is that I have changed the things the way I was doing earlier. When there is a room full of people, I can actually speak with them, I can interact with them. Here, I just rework those very same exercises, all those activities which I was doing in the presence of everyone, into more a distance approach. Again, like I'm quoting Amit, I think there is that social distance thing never happens. It's only a physical distance. That's all that is. So the moment I overcome that, okay, physical distance doesn't mean that I'm socially disconnected. The idea changed. So after sitting idle for a month and a half, suddenly I am now too full. So that is where the situation is. So I'll just give these 2 examples and say the leader just needs to sit down and say, okay, things have gone wrong. they can go worse. Now,
Yeah.
what is it that I want right now? Is my purpose still the same that was there when I started? If it has changed, be honest, be aware, and say, oh, okay, it has changed. Let me change the purpose.
Yeah.
Then see what happens, and then go ahead. So that's all there is.
So I think it's about acknowledging. One has to acknowledge that there is a problem, and this problem needs an answer. Yeah, Nanjuna, please.
Well, I just like to quote Khalil Gibran here. The teacher who walks in the shadow of the temple among his followers gives not of his wisdom, but rather of his faith and his lovingness. If he is indeed wise, he does not bid you enter the house of his wisdom, but rather leads you to the threshold of your own mind. So, just
Yeah,
Raj's thing,
correct.
I can't. I thought it's best articulated in Khalil Gibran. Forgive me, Raj.
You said it. I think you put it succinctly. I think that was the best.
Not me, Khalil Gibran.
You quoted him. That's okay. Hey, Khalil Gibran is not going to contest it anymore. Not now. Okay.
Yeah. So, Dr. Pradeep, you have something to kind of add to this because you kind of talked about one is the innovation. You gave a slightly different and the new approach to it. But is there from the product, or if you have certain examples, if there is something that you have seen in any of your startups that perhaps may help our entrepreneurs and startups.
So, what I would say actually is in times like this, it's also very important to be a little bit calm and patient and not get very badly agitated. You need to have that calmness and thought process in how we want to address this problem. Because one is to say we want to pivot, right? Obviously, we want to pivot because things are not working. But the real big question is, when do you exactly want to pivot? Do you want to wait for some more time to check it out? So the point where you are going to pivot is extremely important. Because I want to put a word of caution here is sometimes you may be reaching a point where you are just very close to success, but you don't see it. But that last 5 mile or the last mile is kind of evading you. So as mentors, I think if we could sense that, and many times I see that founders or the people or entrepreneurs who are so focused that they feel that nothing seems to be working. But from an outside perspective, if you look at it, you can start sensing it that these guys are going to make it. Just that small step, and they're just missing that.
Yeah.
So this is the point I would like to kind of add. I think all the inputs are so I don't have to say much about it. All of them is absolutely relevant.
Yeah. Great. So
I'll just
let's,
add to this, if you
yes,
don't mind, Grish. So
please,
just coming
please.
through from Doctor, keeping composed and calm mind. I mean, this is something that I've seen with one of my clients. In fact, since COVID, I've not visited. We've been over only talking over the phone and interacting so on. So he runs a chain of clinics. I can't give more information, and suddenly the clinics were stopped, because patients cannot come, and we were actually doing much better in revenues, and suddenly there was a crash, and the revenues kind of collapsed. But I think he kind of took a step back. He said, "Okay, I mean, it's not there." First 3 weeks, 4 weeks when during the lockdown was announced, things were not working. They were totally shut down. There was no movement. Only emergency services were running, and I think he kept his composure. And I was surprised the way he kind of contained himself, because obviously a lot of money has been taken up. We don't know what's going to be future. Whether salaries could be sustained and so on and so forth. But he kept his patient, and slowly, once the first unlock happened, he started putting his thoughts. And during this period, I think what I have seen is he utilized himself so well to kind of see whether he can work now in a lean organization. And so when we were working together, we had put in a lot of layers, a lot of fat, and suddenly we found that this was all fat. This was not required, and you could actually work with much leaner organization. Which so it's not agile, I would say, but more leaner, and things started working slowly. Last couple of months revenues have started coming in. He's able to manage with these very select amount of people. He's kept his composure. He's also started investing into technology. So he took this time to invest into technology, and that's the pivot I'm seeing. Suddenly from a very traditionally run business, it's kind of become a technology run business. I had to really drill a lot of things during that time, which went over his head. But now it's kind of realizing, no, this is the way it could work. This is the way we could actually have done. And I mean, practically on a daily basis, we are over the phone. I don't visit them physically, but what I'm seeing is there is a 180-degree shift in the way. So adaptability is there, but then how do I pivot and use this as an opportunity? So he did not let sink down. His mental ability and all that has actually gone much better. And I think in the next 2 to 3 months, there should be a good recovery in the way things are working, and we should see some good results starting Jan. So that's another thing, how a person takes these circumstances and kind of absorbs and does not get shaken. We've seen unfortunate circumstances where people have taken very drastic steps. So that's not something one has to do. This will come, this will go, and how you turn them around. There was this farmer who was facing problems. Suddenly he struck an idea, and I read, I think it's north of Karnataka. He started growing guava, and he's earning now lakhs and lakhs, right? There was this one guy who lost his job, and he went back to his village, said, I don't know what to do. Suddenly an idea struck, and he started making disposable your plates and cups out of leaves, and he's now minting money, and he's gotten people, given them jobs. So guy who was working, struggling, is now doing so well. So I think that's a frame of mind, and that's something that we as mentors can also drill down and help people and all our startups who are going through this tough phase. So yeah.
No, I completely concur with what you said. I mean, this is also an opportunity to kind of stay more calmer, saner, and look at those things. Look at doing those things that you always wanted to do earlier. Perhaps there are organizations which actually need some amount of digital transformation, and we have seen with respect to some of our own incubating companies. When earlier we kind of talked about those things, they said, okay, not really needed. I have people to do those things and all that. But again, what used to happen usually when people did it, okay, there was some of the information or the data was really falling through some of those cracks. But today you have such variety of tools, platforms, which can give you an edge. And like as you mentioned, it's all about also thinking about the lean way of doing it. So that's where your digital transformation comes in, and then you should look at today. There are plenty of tools that are available, and how you can kind of co-opt them into your business, and then start seeing that productivity going up, and not despair that oh, I don't have such a large team. So with a small team, with these kind of good tools and resources, and plus you have somebody to kind of guide you and mentor you, I think you will be definitely fine. So yes, I think Anand, if you have any perspective to kind of add to this?
Sure.
Just one second, Anand, just excuse me. I think I'm now hitting the hard stop.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Please forgive me, excuse me. It was great being here. Look forward to meeting all of you individually. And I'll just once again quote Amit. I just loved that. There's no social distancing. It's just physical distance. So let's meet up and take this forward. And thanks
Sure.
thanks to Girish and Nanjunda, for making this happen.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you, Raj, very much. We'll catch up, and
Thanks.
it was great listening to some of those thoughts. And I'm sure all the startups and entrepreneurs who are going to listen to this are definitely going to get benefited, and they will join us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes, Anand.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say was, that I think it's good that we say, be calm, right? But the life of an entrepreneur is very much challenging, right? And I know for a fact that there are quite a few of the guys who have not been able to sleep primarily. They've been going through extreme anxiety, right? And that's so I think we shouldn't belittle the fact that there is a large mental wellness issue also, right? Associated with this, and I think that's where entrepreneurs can reach out to people who've been there and done that, like the Ginserv, like Nanju has, I know he's maxed out his credit cards and he slept, he spent many a sleepless nights, right? And I've done that too. And many of us who've been there, right? So we can always guide these chaps, right? And people and say, hey, you know what? It's not the end of the world, and me and Nanju have always had conversations around when is the right time to actually shut down a startup, right? Because there is this psychological connection which we have with things we are very passionate about, and that's also it's a skill, when you actually call the shots as well, in terms of saying, hey, you know what, things are not looking great, right? So I think I think we have to be very conscious of the fact that this is a very hard time, and that's what I was going to say. It's a contrarian thing to what I'm hearing, that it's not easy to be calm, right, when you're an entrepreneur, and and you have to, for example, many of the younger guys, right, they've let go of careers, let's say working for an Accenture to do their own thing, right, and now they're at a point where they have to pay next month's rent, right? So and how do I now live, right? So it's very hard to be calm when those kinds of things happen. But that's where I think we can come in and we can say, hey, you know what, max out your credit card or whatever, right? And we can help them, right, through the process of trying to understand. And I'll just share. So one of my classmates, right? So he's in the US, in Seattle. So he ran into serious issues, right, in a startup. They were trying to do a mentoring startup at that point, right, and ran into serious issues. And what he did was, contrary to what people say, he said, hey, you know what? I can program, right? I can do software development. So I'm going to now support my team by actually providing services, right? Which is a very different thing, right? People say you should focus on your idea and things like that. He said, you know what, times are such that I'm now going to have to do this, right? And he did that, and he was able to bring back the startup, right? So he understood that market cycles will always change, right? Things will get better over a period of time. He did that. He sold his company after about 5 years for about $120 million, right? So I think, the ability to, so that's where we as mentors come in and say, hey, you know what? It's okay to be not calm, right? It's okay to be paranoid, right? It's okay to run around like a headless chicken, but we are there to help you, right? We're there to help you, bring that perspective to you, give you the right interventions, and probably help you make your business model better. And I think that's where Ginserv brings serious value, because me and Nanju, we've looked at, I don't know, about 149 incubators and what they do, kind of a thing, right? And some of the top schools as well. And both of us have been there and given workshops and things, and we know it's a lot of it is glorified bullshit, right? So I think that's where Ginserv is bringing a very, very wonderful perspective, where it's all about getting your hands dirty, right? And that's what we intend to do in this 4-week program, because 4 weeks is very ambitious, right? But again, if it's very tight, and if it's, and if you put, it's a 4-week high pressure workshop, if you will, right? And that's where we end up delivering significant actionable outcomes, I think. So I hope the startups get that, and I hope they understand and register more. And I can guarantee you that we'll provide them significant value. So I just wanted to bring that contrarian perspective, that it's okay to to be freaked out because that happens, right? Nanju, you know that Cisco jab, right? So there's a guy who quit Cisco. He's worked for about 18 years in Cisco. He did his PhD from Stanford, all that. Now he's done his startup. Now he's calling me and saying, "Anand, I'm not able to sleep the night." I said, "Calm down. Things are going to get better, right?" He chose the wrong time to quit. He quit February 1st, right, from Cisco. And then COVID kicks in. So, these things happen. So shit happens. I think we're there to help help people get their head on straight, maybe help them calm down a little bit, but also hopefully provide them with a different business value proposition they can take to the market and which the market will accept.
Anand, wonderful perspective. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. That's really very heartening to hear, Anand, that out of the 149, you
No,
saw
we in fact wanted to publish a report, but then we figured we'll be shot down by somebody, so we just kept quiet.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you for those encouraging words. It's really, motivates us to kind of continue the kind of work that we are doing. And with the support of you all and your ideas, and we can definitely, keep growing and better. Yeah, Nanjun,
No, just was looking at business standards. One of the heading that says 37.8%. That is employment rate falls to 37.8% since the recovery started in May, right? So this is supposed to be a positive news. So let's make no mistake that there are no jobs, right? So entrepreneurial way is the way forward. So if guys are struggling and wondering if they'll just shut shop and find a job, don't know who they are trying to fool.
That's right.
So better they pull up their socks, find a way forward, and go forward with this. And we are there. Ecosystem is there. There are a lot of people like us who want to help with, and opportunities equally there.
Correct. So thanks, Nanjunda and Anand. Anand actually he summed it up, and you kind of complemented well. So I think let me kind of conclude this. We have done it well. I think kept it within an hour and a half with all those initial technical glitches and with our first experience with Airmeet. We have done it very well. Thanks to each one of you. The startup entrepreneur or the founders what they can really expect out of Pivot Labs is basically, I think, as we mentioned, they can get their alignment right with our, by discussing the kind of challenges and get both founders or multiple seeing a kind of a single vision that can be the biggest benefit out of this. They can also redraw the purpose of the venture, kind of say that okay, this is what we were doing and this was not working. What can be the new way and what can be the new purpose? They can also realign the product, customer fit, customer value, whether it is with identifying the opportunities that are lying around, or kind of looking at opportunities of co-creation. They should also look at. We will also dive deep into their business model and see how they can really pivot. And in all this put together, I think this will help them to revive their venture by creating a certain sustainable path for a better and greater future. So I think we look forward to their participation. And, I look forward to interacting with each one of them. It's been great this half. And I'm really excited to starting Pivot Labs in the next week. Thank you everyone, and so see you soon. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Girish.
Thank
All the
you.
best.
Have a good week.